is improving lives of millions of Americans. I yield the floor. And suggest the support.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. We address the Senate as if in morning business.
Without objection, the quorum call is suspended.
Mr. President, I've been engaged in the back and forth for many years concerning the rights of the minority to oppose legislation or nominations for Senate advice and consent, which obviously, as we all know, is part of the Constitution of the United States. And after investing all those hundreds of hours in compromises, both when Republican leadership wanted to act to curtail the rights of the minority, and when Democrats were doing it, I fought hard. As short a time ago, Senator Levin and I and Senator Schumer and others changed the rules to try to expedite the consideration of legislation for a whole lot of reasons, including the fact that a majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have never been here in the minority. We have now acted in a draconian fashion and, in my view, have fundamentally, historically damaged this institution. Among other things, for the first time since the United States Senate has been a body, we have now changed the rules with 51 votes rather than 67. First time in history. And unfortunately, the repercussions of this will be that we are moving a step, very significant step, towards a majority rule body. And as my friend from Michigan, Senator Carl Levin, quoted Senator Vandenberg, a former senator from Michigan and a highly regarded individual in this institution, that we have now broken the rules to change the rules. And I read the night we changed the rules from a letter that Senator Robert Byrd, who was one of the most outstanding leaders and clearly the expert on the Constitution and this institution, had written a letter cautioning against it. So the reason why I come to the floor today is not so much to revisit that because it's done, but I'd like to point out I see the first manifestation of now the majority rule vote. I've been a member of the Homeland Security Committee, and I have been involved in these issues for many years. I've also been involved in the so-called Gang of Eight, where we came up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill which was passed through this body, and we still hope that the other body will address, at least in some way, the issue of comprehensive immigration reform. Well, I come from a border state, as my colleagues know, and our border is not secure. In fact, the majority of drugs that still comes across our southern border comes across the Arizona-Sonora border in Mexico. And my constituents, many of them who live in the southern part of the state of Arizona, have home invasions, have people causing their property. They have, in one case, a rancher has been shot and killed. A Border Patrol agent has been killed. In fact, the reality is that they don't have the same security in the southern part of my state as the rest of our citizens do in other parts of the country. So border security was a fundamental and vitally important issue in the hundreds of hours of debate and discussions that I and my 7 other colleagues engaged in as we shaped the comprehensive immigration reform legislation, which largely intact was passed here through the Senate. And so I went back to my constituents and I said, look, there is a very vital, important provision in this bill, and that is that when this legislation is passed, we will embark on the goal of achieving 90% effective control of our border. Now, we can never get complete control of our border. We all recognize that. But 90% effective control through surveillance, through hiring new people, through capabilities that we have, we can achieve 90% effective control. So then comes the nomination hearing of Mr. Jay Johnson for Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I asked Mr. Johnson a simple, straightforward question. The question was, Mr. Johnson, when you are Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, will you provide this committee and me, Senator McCain, with a description of the measures that need to be taken in order for us to achieve what we have turned into legislation, at least here in the Senate, 90% effective control of our southern border? His answer was no. His answer, believe it or not, was no, that he could not provide that information. In fact, I was so astonished at that I wrote him a letter, and I received a letter back from him, which I would like included in the record in just a minute, and that is, quote, here it is, November 19, 2013, Senator McCain, I regret that in my current posture as a nominee and private citizen, I am not now in a position to commit to provide the information you seek from the Department of Homeland Security. At this point, I must respectfully refer you to the Department's current leadership. I know this was a matter of discussion between you and Secretary Napolitano, and I understand your frustration. I believe I have demonstrated to you and others on the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, why he said Armed Services Committee, I'm not sure, but I have a strong respect for Congress's oversight role. If I am confirmed, and if your request is still outstanding, at that point I promise that addressing your letter will be a top and immediate priority for me. So in other words, the nominee for the Department of Homeland Security, direct responsibility for securing our borders, direct responsibility as outlined in legislation passed by this body, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, refuses to give me and this body the information, and I would hope that there were other senators who might be interested in what's necessary to achieve 90% effective control of our border. He refuses to give me that information. Thanks to the good offices of my beloved friend Carl Levin and my dear friend Senator Carper, I just came from a meeting in my office with Mr. J. Johnson. Mr. J. Johnson again repeated to me that he could not give me the information of what is necessary, what tools are necessary to ensure 90% effective control of our border. Now, allegedly, he is being prevented from doing that by the White House. Now, it's stunning. Why would the White House prevent the nominee for Secretary of Homeland Security from providing members of the Senate and members of the committee that oversight Homeland Security information which is fundamental information if we are going to achieve effective control of our border? So now I go back to Arizona and I say, yeah, it's in the law, my friends. It's in the law that we're going to have to get 90% effective control of our border, but I don't know how you do it, because the agency that will be required to do it will not give me the information of what is necessary to do it. So, my friends, we will be voting Monday, I guess, to confirm Mr. Johnson. He will be confirmed. There's no doubt about it now that we have majority vote. And we have now deprived Republicans of their advice and consent responsibilities and authority. So we've not only changed the rules of the Senate, we have abridged the Constitution of the United States. Because the only way that I could have gotten this information from Mr. Johnson was if I'd have said, I can't approve of your nomination until you provide the information which by any objective observer I am entitled to. And not only entitled to, it's my responsibility to know that. It's my responsibility. That's why we have a committee. That's why we have a committee, the Homeland Security Committee, that oversights the functions of the executive branch. That's how government, equal branches of government are supposed to function. So now we have Mr. Johnson will be confirmed, and the message will go out. Believe me, the message will go out. You don't have to answer a question by a Republican senator. You don't have to respond to a straightforward question. There was nothing devious about the question that I asked Mr. Johnson. There was nothing complicated. I know that they certainly should have the information of what steps and measures are necessary to ensure 90% effective control of our border, which is a requirement in the law that at least if it is ever passed by, certainly a requirement is passed by the Senate of the United States of America. So it's really a very kind of sad day. It was a sad day for me when we changed the rules. It was a sad day for me to see people who have been here a very short period of time basically shatter the comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, that exists and is vital to doing business here in the United States Senate. So I also would like to point out to my colleagues, particularly those who are new, who really drove this change in the Senate rules, and I want to tell you this. I've been here long enough that what goes around comes around, and what goes around will come around, and to their deep regret, someday, I say to the President and I say to my colleagues who voted for it on a party line vote, for the first time in history, changing the rules of the United States Senate from 67 votes to 51 votes, you will regret it. And the people who will really suffer from this is the American people, because this place is largely dysfunctional anyway. But if you think it was dysfunctional before, wait and see. And I say that with deep, deep regret, because I value and treasure my relationships with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Some of the best friends that I have are on the other side of the aisle. But to expect to do business as usual, when I can't even get a straight answer for a question that now, by not having the answer, inhibits and in ways prohibits my ability to carry out my responsibilities to the citizens of my state, cannot be gone unresponded to. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The Senate continues work on judicial and executive nominations. They've been in session continuously since Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Majority Leader Reid announced earlier today that a deal has been reached to push the final votes on those nominations until next week. Under new rules enacted last month, only a simple majority of votes are needed to confirm a nominee. And to protest that new rule, Senate Republicans forced the Senate to remain in session overnight on Wednesday and Thursday. And over those last 2 days, the Senate confirmed 8 of the president's executive and judicial nominees. Earlier, Republican Senators John McCain and Jim Inhofe spoke on the floor about why they oppose the new rules on approving presidential nominees.
We went through something, and I want to talk a little bit about the National Defense Authorization Act. Every year we have a National Defense Authorization Act. That act is more important than anything else we do around here, in my opinion. Now, if you read the Constitution, it'll say providing for the nation's defense is our major concern. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And so we have always had, in fact, for 51 consecutive years, we passed an NDAA bill prior to January. And it's always been that way. This is a budget that must take place. Now, this is very disturbing to me because the House passed an NDAA bill some time ago. We in the Senate and the Senate Armed Services Committee, way back, was it May or June? I guess that it was in June. In June, we passed the NDAA out of our committee, not unanimously, but by almost unanimously, and it was bipartisan, strong bipartisan support to come to the floor. Well, it never came up. And why it never came up is not that important right now. The fact is, we're now in a position where we have to do it and have to have one coming up it has to be this coming week. So anyway, we put together a bill. There's a thing a lot of people don't understand because it's not very often used. But when the House and the Senate are not able to put something together, they go to the big four. They get the Committee of Jurisdiction. In this case, the Senate Armed Services Committee. So they have the chairman, the ranking member. The ranking member is the one that has the most rank from the minority. That's me in the case of the Senate. And then the chairman of the House and the ranking member of the House. 4 people. We sat together 10 days ago here in Washington and put together a bill, taking the best parts out of the House bill, best parts out of the Senate bill, and put together this thing. And it's one that I think when people understand it, it is one that I don't know of anyone who would really oppose it. The problem we're having is that the way it was done is not the way it should have been done. It should have been done as it's been done in the past, and that is take about, well, it's been in the last 10 years, it's taken 9 days average to pass this bill. So we have all of the amendments process, and people come forth with amendments. Well, that didn't happen this time. So what we did in this bill, we took 79 of the amendments that people had in the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, and we did 79, that's 41 Republican amendments and 38 Democrat amendments. These are ones that had been introduced on the Senate floor, and we were able to go ahead and put these into the bill. So we have a good bill. It's out there. We need to we really need to do it. And I believe that if people are concerned about the process, I am concerned. We're going to get busy to make sure this doesn't happen in future years. We don't want it to happen, but we don't want our service people who are in harm's way today to be paying for the fact that we had a procedure that was wrong. We have a vehicle here. We have a bill. It will come up for consideration. It will come over from the House, and I anticipate first part of the week we'll have this bill. Now, what does it do? First, it authorizes 37 special incentive pays, including reenlistment bonuses and certain health professionals bonuses. Here we're talking about people who are considering reenlisting right now. They're in the service. I mentioned a minute ago some of the aviators. But this is just mostly the Army and the Marines and the Navy. These people are making career decisions. They make career decisions predicated on what they anticipate is going to be out there. And what's going to be out there is what kind of a bonus they'll get at the time. And, of course, if in the event this doesn't happen, they would not be entitled to these bonuses if we don't pass this bill. That's how significant it is. When you talk about certain health professional bonuses, they would expire also. And these health benefit bonuses are very significant because these are the people who are the health providers for our wounded warriors. Our wounded warriors, not just the ones that are in our hospitals today, but also in hospice care. And we can't do that to them. But however, if we don't pass this bill, that's going to be a real serious problem. There's been a lot of talk about the sexual assault. We have 2 senators, both Democrats, Senator Gillibrand, Senator McCaskill, who disagree with each other, but they have amendments. And so what we did is take the parts of each one of these bills, 27 specific reforms to support victims and to encourage sexual assault reporting, and an additional 9 enhancements to the military justice system. Arguably, the one on the floor who knows most about this would be our friend Senator Graham. And I think he's looked at these and agrees that these provisions are really very significant and things that aren't going to be there otherwise. These would have been in the House bill, in the Senate bill, in the regular procedure to pass these bills, but they won't be there if we don't pass this one bill. They are there. Gitmo. Now, I know I look around the chamber, and it seems like there's such a diverse attitude toward what we have done in the past and will do in the future with Gitmo. That's the Guantanamo Bay down in Cuba. Well, I've often said from this podium that one of the few good deals that we've had is that we've had Gitmo since the year 1904, and it costs $4,000 a year, and half the time Castro doesn't collect it. So it's a pretty good deal. You don't very often get in government. I do know, though, it's very expensive to house people there, but it does perform a function that can't be performed anywhere else. So the last year in the Senate Armed Services, in the National Defense Authorization Bill, we put a provision in there, unfortunately, fortunately at that time, that would restore the one-year prohibition on transferring Gitmo detainees to the United States and to construct any type of facilities to house them if they're successful in doing that. Well, that wasn't good. I mean, that was good because it should have been forever, but it expires now.
All time be terminated.
Without objection?
I now yield back all time on the Patterson nomination.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business. Senators allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I now ask consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further action on SRES 299.
Without objection.
And that we proceed to that matter.
Clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 299, congratulating the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee on the celebration of its 100th anniversary and so forth, and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate shall proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion we consider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of SRES 263 and that we now proceed to the matter.
Clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 263, designating the week of September 23rd